And welcome to Monday. It is Monday on the Vince Coglianese Show. Vince is not here today. My name is Mike Opelka. I've been here in the past. Maybe you remember. Glad to be back. Thrilled to be back. Honored to be here. Especially on a day when so much is happening. So much going on. As a matter of fact, moments before we took to the airwaves, breaking news. 2 Israeli hostages released by Hamas. Now, that's good news. We don't know if they are Americans. Don't know yet, because there are a lot of people with dual citizenship. It would be great if they're Americans, but it's also very good to see some of the hostages released. I was one of the people who was deathly concerned that the majority of those counted as hostages could be no longer among the living. It's a terrible thing to have to say, but you have to accept that possibility because of the kind of brutality we witnessed 17 days ago by these vermin, these terrorists, Hamas. You have to expect that anything especially terrible is possible. So to have 2 Israeli hostages released by Hamas, we will find out soon, I imagine, if they are, in fact, American citizens who will join the 2 other Americans who were released and on their way back to Evanston, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. But we do have more than 200 who are listed as missing. And I, for one, am absolutely outraged, still angry, that we have 31 or 32 dead Americans killed in the attack of October 7th. 31 or 32. We're still waiting to get complete confirmation on that. And there doesn't seem to be a palpable amount of outrage from the executive branch of the government, just in my opinion. The White House doesn't seem to be all that distressed about it. 32 dead Americans. This is troubling, plus maybe 10 others who are missing, presumed to be hostages. And we're hearing many different things, but I don't seem to hear the executive leadership that America is probably expecting. And I go way back looking at history every single day. Every day I get up and I try and figure out what happened on this day back in the day. Because that's the way you learn, is by studying history. You learn to avoid the awful stuff, and you learn how to repeat the good stuff. And it was on this day in 1983, 241 United States military personnel were killed by a suicide bomber in Beirut, Lebanon. 241 American military personnel killed by a suicide bomber. And that day, Ronald Reagan returned to the White House. And as he got off Marine One, the same helicopter you see President Biden get off and wander into the White House, or eventually get into the White House, Reagan went right to the microphone, and addressed the awaiting media.
I'm not going to take any questions this morning because we are going right into meetings on the events that have taken place in this tragic weekend. But I would like to make this statement. I know there are no words that can express our sorrow and grief over the loss of those splendid young men and the injury to so many others. I know there are no words also that can ease the burden of grief for the families of those young men. Likewise, there are no words to properly express our outrage, and I think the outrage of all Americans, at the despicable act, following as it does on the one perpetrated several months ago in the spring that took the lives of scores of people at our embassy in that same city, in Beirut. But I think we should all recognize that these deeds make so evident the bestial nature of those who would assume power if they could have their way and drive us out of that area.
Now, I can't express how much I love the power of a leader who is not afraid to call out, as Reagan said, the bestial nature of the acts. And we had the same kind of horrific act that was put upon the people of Israel on the 7th of October. And I have yet to hear that kind of strength come out of this administration. In fact, I've heard what appears to be more acquiescence, more soft pedaling, more, hey, let's not rush to judgment here. No, we do at least hear that at least Israel will be granted the right to defend itself. But then there's a but. There's always a but. But, so we will see what happens here. I know it's 40 years ago today that President Reagan made that address. And last week when we had Joe Biden and his 15 minutes that I thought was one of the more confusing addresses he's ever given, that didn't exactly inspire confidence in the minds of the American people. 32 dead Americans, 10, 12 missing, presumed to be held hostages, 200 more Israelis held hostage. Where's the outrage? And I know there are people saying, well, you don't want to trigger World War III. Hello? Does anyone realize we're there already? We're on top of something already? Strength is what's needed. A show of strength is what's needed. And I think that's really what has to happen here. John Kirby, the spokesperson, was I know we're supposed to call him Retired Admiral Kirby, but they always call him John Kirby. Kirby was in the press briefing today with KJP, and just doesn't inspire confidence from me. This seems to be the wet noodle that's out there representing America to the world. Here's one of the clips from today.
Don't you think President Biden needs to play a role towards peace instead of saying that he could handle 2 wars at a time? Does that give a good impression to fight 2 wars at a time instead of working towards peaceful things?
From the beginning of this administration, we have been working for a more integrated, cooperative, peaceful, stable, and prosperous Middle East. And I'm not going to reiterate for you the list of accomplishments, but they're all there. I'm happy to send you an email with them. We have been working hard on trying to get the Middle East to be a more stable, prosperous region.
I think that's a fail. I think that's a fail. You say we've been working hard for a more integrated, cooperative, peaceful, stable, and prosperous Middle East. That's a fail. That's a fail unless the prosperity you're talking about is the prosperity of the bomb-making facilities. You know, I get very nervous every time I watch this guy speak, every time he answers questions, because I don't feel comfortable that there's any real credibility behind Admiral Kirby and that he is just repeating whatever he's been told to repeat in terms of catchphrases for the day. Kirby, again, earlier today was on CNN answering questions. And you know, there's several hundred Americans in Gaza. Several hundred Americans in Gaza. We're not talking about the 31, 32 dead Americans. We're not talking about the 10, 12 American hostages, the 200 Israeli hostages. We're talking about several hundred American citizens currently in Gaza who apparently have reached out and said they want to get out. How's that going? How are we going to be able to get that done?
Yeah, for sure. But this is hard stuff.
We talk a lot about the hostages. There are several hundred American citizens that are currently in Gaza.
Yeah.
To the point made by Sammy there, what is the disconnect right now? When will they be allowed out?
I wish I could tell you date certain, time certain. We want to get them out. We want to make sure that they have safe passage out. And we are working very, very hard, both with the Israelis and with the Egyptians, to get to that outcome. Right now, of course, you've seen some humanitarian assistance flow in, but we have not forgotten the plight of those hundreds of Americans that are on the other side of that Rafah crossing. We know they want to get home or get out, and we want to help them get out, and we are working on that very, very hard.
Where's the confidence of the America that most of us grew up in? That we will make sure our people are protected, our people get out, our people are not in the hands of a terror organization that just 17 days ago took the lives of thousands of Israelis. Where is that confidence? Seriously, I wish we could hear that. We're not hearing it from the president. You're not hearing it from Kirby either. I don't hear that confidence. And if I'm missing it, you can tell me. If I'm missing it, you're welcome to call and correct me at 888-630-9625. Kirby says, he's got no information, no new information. Now, maybe they have information. Maybe Kirby has information, but he knew there were going to be hostages released, and he didn't want to mess with that deal. Maybe. I'm going to play both sides of this because you're supposed to do that when you argue anything in a court of law. You're supposed to kind of figure it out from the other person's side, whether it's the prosecution or the defense. Kirby was asked about those hostages currently being held by Hamas.
Admiral, can you tell us the latest on the status of hostages and the work to try to release additional hostages? Do you see a category of those being held who might be sort of the next available to be released if that were to take place? Can you give us a sense of what that picture looks like?
I wish I could, Kelly. I really do. And these are all great questions, but unfortunately where we are right now in the process makes it impossible for us to publicly detail the efforts that are going on.
Now, I'm gonna cut him some slack, because if we were in the process of negotiating and getting a release, then he did give the right answer, because you don't want to risk screwing up a release. But we don't want to get a gold star for asking a question that you think is a good question. I would like journalists to just be journalists again, to not have fear of upsetting the spokesperson at the podium that day, because then they won't get called on again for 6 months. Hello, New York Post. This is really disturbing to me. I get more angry with it every day, especially when I think of what every one of those hostages has gone through since October 7th, since they were dragged, some of them, to a tunnel and then held for God knows how many hours in the dark, or what's been done to them. Where is the strength? Where is the Reagan voice? Just hoping to know. And then there are the problems at home that we have. The problems with the protest. I watched the protest that happened in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn yesterday, and I went, oh, God's sakes, I have so many friends in that part of New York. And so many of them are the young people. There's a lot of hipsters in Brooklyn. I didn't need to tell you that. You probably knew. But to have the chanting in the streets, and there were some awful chants we can't play on the radio, of course, but they were chanting, of course, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They're chanting about how first the Saturday people will be eliminated, then the Sunday people. And if you don't understand that, you should have paid attention in Sunday school or at yeshiva. First, the Saturday people means the Jews will be eliminated. Then the Sunday people. Everyone who doesn't bend the knee to Allah in the minds of these terrorists is going to be eliminated, or needs to be. Everyone. So what do you do with those foreign nationals who are now protesting in pro-Hamas protests all around the country? And yeah, I'm a First Amendment guy, but if people are out there pushing violence and the elimination of an entire group of people, that's not free speech. That's fomenting terrorism. We had the FBI in Catholic churches, and you don't want to get nervous about this? Very concerned about it. We have a lot to get to today. Updates on what's happening with the 2 hostages reportedly released today. We don't have any other information. Then they are Israeli, probably, maybe dual citizenship. We'll find out if we can. We are also, since we're, almost 2 weeks away from the election here in Virginia, Governor Glenn Youngkin is going to join us in about 15 minutes to kind of kick things off. And there's some really important questions I have to ask him about a really important issue as it relates to your ability to choose what you would like to drive. I'm pro-choice when it comes to the right to drive. I want to be able to choose whatever I want to drive, as long as it's legal, right? We'll talk to Governor Youngkin about that. And there is a shocking story about the terrorists that really nobody's talking about. And what fueled the rage and the horrific barbaric behavior by these people who I think are now subhuman. And it's chemical, and it's illegal, and it's all part of a cartel in the Middle East. We'll talk to author Gerald Posner next hour about that. He's got an incredible piece of journalism on that, and so many other things we have to get to today. SNL is back after the writer's strike, and they're doing some pretty silly things. But we have to step aside for just a quick break. Of course, that's the great Larry O'Connor. I'm just jealous because he's a wine ambassador. It's Mike Opelka in for Vince today, Vince Coglianese Show. And we've got Governor Youngkin coming up just around the corner. But a couple of quick calls. Let's see. I know we don't have much time, but David in D.C., what's on your mind? Welcome.
Hey, so I couldn't agree with you more about our innocuous leadership. But I had a question about the 30 or so hostages we had, but then everybody's talking about the 200, 300 other American citizens in Gaza. Were they just vacationing there?
700 Americans is what we heard earlier.
700.
Yeah, I don't understand why they were there. Now, there are a lot of people that maybe...
Let them figure it out then.
Well, they may be supporters of the Palestinian agenda who have gone there. You know, that can happen. And they may not be terrorists, but it's just unfortunate. But if they're American citizens, we need to do everything we can to get them out. They're still American citizens. And it just infuriates me. I appreciate you, David. Real quickly, in York, PA is Charlie. Hey, Charlie, you got just a few seconds. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this is a repeating pattern with the Biden administration. Just go back to Afghanistan.
Yeah,
we saw what happened there. There was no problem. You know, we left people behind for a considerable length of time, both Americans and Afghanis. And as Bob Gates said, Joe Biden's never been on the right side of anything as far as, his foreign policy.
Bob Gates is not wrong. Thank you very much, Charlie. Appreciate you. Mike Opelka in for Vince Coglianese. We'll talk to Governor Youngkin just around the corner on the Vince Coglianese program. It is the Vince Coglianese Show. Vince is not here today. Mike Opelka is my name. Happy to be here. Thrilled to be here. So much going on in our world today, both locally, nationally, internationally, and probably out in the planets somewhere as well. We'll get to as much of it as we can. But all politics are local, are they not? That is the axiom we so often hear. And the most important elections, I believe, leading up to the big one in 380 days. I think we're 380 days now. My God, that moved quickly. The most important ones are local. And in the state of Virginia, voting started. It seems like voting started in the spring. It's the whole concept of early voting. It's one that I get nervous about because I want us to get back to voting on Election Day. I'm one of those old fogies who wants that to happen. I'm a traditionalist, but I understand we need to make sure we play by the rules that the other guys are playing by so we don't get snookered. And we've got the guy who we can talk about this with right now. Governor Glenn Youngkin is joining us. Governor Youngkin, thank you for being here, first of all.
Mike, great to be with you, and thanks for just reiterating the importance of voting. And we got to get everybody out to vote. You know, Mike, in 2021, I think we shocked the Commonwealth and the nation by pulling off an election that brought people together around common sense, conservative leadership. It's worked. I think voters across Virginia are happy with the job we're doing. And so we got to get people out to vote. And the crazy thing is, Mike, that there were 500,000 people that voted for me and Winsome Sears, our great lieutenant governor, and Jason Miyares, our great attorney general, that didn't show up and vote for the congressional midterms. So we got to get everybody off the sidelines, get out and vote. The polls are open. You can go to secureyourvotevirginia.com, figure out the polls closest to you, and let's go vote and win this thing.
Yeah, it is maybe, and I know there's no exaggeration when you say this. Every election now going forward is the most important election of our lifetimes because they're pivotal in determining the future. And if the state can take the state Senate back, if the voters can take the state Senate back and put it back in the hands of Republicans, and the House will stay strongly Republican, and then a strong governor like Governor Glenn Youngkin can be there leading the charge, I feel fairly comfortable in saying that Virginia can become solidly red going forward on national elections. Or is it presumptuous of me to say that, Governor?
Well, I think, first of all, when we brought everybody together in 2021, it was a real movement, and we swept, and we had a big agenda, and we've delivered. And we now have 230,000 more people working in Virginia. We've had $5 billion of tax relief. That's $2,200 for every Virginia family. And if you're a vet, up to $40,000 of your retirement is not taxed in Virginia anymore because we serve those who serve us. We've empowered parents. We put in high-intensity tutoring to make up for the bad decisions made in the previous administration, keeping kids out of the classroom. And we backed the blue. And I'll tell you, I'm so proud of the work we're doing to pay our law enforcement more, to give them the appropriate training and equipment, and to really go to work to bring crime down. This is real-time stuff that needed to be done, but there is so much more to do. And if we can hold our House and flip our Senate and basically take the brakes off, Virginia will soar. And I think Virginia will be solidly red, and I think Virginia will continue to lead the way in common sense, conservative policies that work.
Well, I agree with you, and I support it. And I watched, as a Delaware resident, frustratingly so because the state is horribly blue, but in watching what Virginia did from a grassroots point of view, taking it from the schools to the streets and then to the ballot box, it is a blueprint, I think, for success around the country, and I hope the rest of the nation is following you. But there are two things on my mind, Governor. I know we only have a limited amount of time. Two things on my mind. The left is trying to make this all about abortion when, if you look at Europe, Europe has like 12 weeks of a limit on abortion after 12 weeks, and 15 weeks, the left is saying, oh, it's a horrible thing, a horrible thing. They're trying to make this a single issue for voters. And I think there are other issues. For example, the imposition of California's ridiculous standards on your ability to purchase the car you want. I think that's a greater threat that needs to be pointed out because it affects everybody. Cars affect everybody. Can the emotional stance of trying to make this about abortion outweigh the freedom of choice issues like the automotive issue?
Yeah, I don't believe that voters are only focused on one issue, and I believe that voters see a real path forward with the position that we've promised that we would move forward with, which is to protect life at 15 weeks when a baby can feel pain. And you know, Mike, I'm a pro-life governor. That's Virginians elected a pro-life governor, and I've been very clear about that. And I've looked at what Virginia almost did now about 3 years ago, where we were one vote away from watching Virginia extend abortion all the way up through and including birth, paid for by taxpayer expense.
Wow.
And we can come together around a bill to protect life when a baby can feel pain at 15 weeks. We can do this. We've seen a vast majority of Virginians, a majority of women, a majority of Democrats support this position. And I think it's one that people can see either no limits, which is what the progressive left wants, or reasonable limits. And we can land this. And I also think that really does balance everyone in a focus on these other really important topics. We've got to continue to drive economic growth by reducing the cost of living and reducing and streamlining regulations. We have to get rights back for Virginians to decide what car they drive. And it is the most out of bounds thing I've ever seen when the previous administration signed a bill to allow bureaucrats in California to decide what car Virginians drive. This is all about individual liberty and decision making, and to try to turn Virginia into California is something that's never going to happen while I'm governor of Virginia. But we also recognize that we've got to continue to stand up for parents and make sure that they have the head seat at the table, and we've made great progress there. But we can also raise expectations for our kids by raising the ceiling and the floor. And I am so excited about the new history standards that we have rolled out, and the expectations in math, and the intense tutoring that's now been rolling out across the Commonwealth to help kids catch up from these terrible decisions that were made in the last administration to keep kids out of school. We were 44th in the nation in getting kids back in the classroom. So there's so much work to be done. We can do it. We've got to hold our house and flip our Senate. It's all doable, and that's why these elections are so important. One last thing I would add, Mike, is that, common sense conservative leadership and policies work. It's amazing what happens when you reduce the cost of living. People stay, they move here. It's amazing what happens when you streamline regulations and reduce the cost of doing businesses. They expand and hire more people. 230,000 more Virginians working, the largest labor force today in the history of the state. And so we can see a real path forward, and we are either going to accelerate when we win these elections, or we're going to see more speed bumps when the other side tries to take common sense and put it back in the drawer like they did when they were in control. This is what it's about. This is why it's so important that people get out and vote. You can go to secureyourvotevirginia.com, make a plan, vote early. And if you don't vote early, please show up on Election Day on November the 7th. We can't afford to leave a single vote on the sidelines.
SecureYourVoteVirginia.org. Get it done.
.com.
I don't know why I thought it was .org, but .com. SecureYourVoteVirginia.com. Get out there, and if you know someone who hasn't voted, make sure you bring a friend with you and get everybody going. Governor, nothing short of just a remarkable progress you've made in the short time you've been there, and I hope it continues, and I hope other states are paying attention. Thank you for giving us some time today, and great success in the next couple of weeks as this election comes down to the finish line.
Mike, thank you. God bless you, and let's go win this thing.
Yes, sir. God bless. There he goes. Governor Youngkin, I resisted every chance that came up in my brain to ask him, well, what about 2024? I wasn't warned, but I let it go. The issue that Governor Youngkin referred to, and I referred to briefly, is this crazy deal where Virginia signed on, and I think there are 14 or 15 other states in the nation who signed on to agree to impose whatever California does as it relates to the Clean Air Act on their states. So if California decides they're going to mandate that only 35% of the cars sold in that state can be internal combustion engines, meaning gas-powered engines, then those states will have to do the same thing. And it's crazy because it means that car companies are then going to have to change. See, California has been in control of the CAFE standards, the miles per gallon standards that car companies have to adhere to for a long time. And California's been dictating it because of all the cars they had. And all these Democrat states, like sheep, just got in line. And before Governor Youngkin got there, I'm sorry to say that Virginia signed on to this California thing. There's a great piece in the Wall Street Journal today, just a couple days ago. It's called Glenn Youngkin's Plan to Save Gas Cars. And if you've been paying attention lately, the electric car thing is a really bad idea. And I'm here to tell you, from the standpoint of a recovering electric car owner, I owned and drove as a daily driver a Tesla Model 3, the little one. They've got a little smaller one now. But I drove it every day as my daily driver for 3.5 years. And after the end of that experiment, I didn't do it to save the world. I did it because I thought it was a cool car with a lot of technology. And in the end, it was a cool car with a lot of technology that was more expensive to insure, more expensive to repair, and more expensive because you have to put tires on the car more often than not. I went through 3 sets of tires and 39,000 miles. I wish I were kidding. 3 sets of very expensive tires. in 3.5 years. It's because electric cars are not going to save the planet. And their batteries are toxic. What we need to do to make the batteries, to get the minerals for the batteries, is horrible. It's making little children mine cobalt, making little children working with their hands and hammers in toxic situations in Africa. And then once the batteries are dead, they're toxic too, and you can't bury them. You can't break them down. I am not going to ever again own an electric car. If I have to buy a bunch of old gas-powered cars and keep them in the backyard and run them till they break down, I will. But I'm glad that Governor Youngkin is trying to make sure the people of Virginia are afforded the opportunity to make the choice of what they drive theirs and not beholden to California and the crazy whack jobs on the left coast. Okay, mini rant over. So many things we have to get to. There will be updates on the names and identities of the 2 hostages recently released, literally before the show started, 5 minutes before the show started. We got news that Hamas released 2 Israeli hostages. It doesn't appear they're Americans, and we'll find out where that stands. I have an update on something that I think we're witnessing, and I think it's safe to say it's the Van Jones theory in effect. The Van Jones theory, where he said he was willing to forego the cheap satisfaction of the radical pose for the deep satisfaction of the radical ends. I think it's starting to kick into high gear, and we need to point that out. We'll connect the dots on that, plus an update on what happened on SNL and why Saturday Night Live isn't making it available for replay. I think they made fun of Joe Biden, but we're not allowed to see that. You're only allowed to see them make fun of Donald John Trump. It's Mike Opelka in for Vince Coglianese on the Vince Coglianese Show, and we just wrapped up talking with Governor Youngkin, and that sometimes can ignite the phones, which it did. Susie is in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and on the phone with us. Susie, what's on your mind? Welcome.
Hey, thank you. Well, when you were talking about the importance of the car issue, you said that everyone, I believe you said everyone is not affected by abortion, and I'd like to say I think indeed we are. We're missing sons and daughters, grandchildren, siblings, classmates, neighbors, sponsors, spouses, engineers, artists, inventors, preachers, athletes, cancer researchers, car designers, and something that's hardly ever talked about is the impact on the women who make an abortion decision that suffer, whether they were pressured, whether they were lied to, they weren't given the right information, whether they felt they had no choice, or whether they wanted to not miss swimsuit season. We're all impacted in tremendous ways, and we have to recognize, we have to acknowledge the impact that this has had on our society across the world. It's a mindset that has to change. It doesn't matter that abortion is reduced as long as it's still around and just applauded and celebrated, and women are told that they're courageous. They're not courageous. They're courageous when they make these hard decisions, when they look and search for the help that's being offered to them, and they turn away from the lies that they're better off and that they need abortion in order to be successful or need abortion in order to be happy. Our lives are
Susie,
good because we get to others.
I'm sorry. Susie, we're up against the clock. I apologize for interrupting you. I should have added the word directly, because directly affected is what I was referring to. And I know all of your examples are rock solid, and I appreciate not only your passion, but your clarity. It's Mike Opelka in for Vince on WMAL.